we head further down L Street. Please join me in congratulating Nathaniel Colley. Welcome to the Sacramento Walk on Stars. Let's go ahead and lift your star. Congratulations.
Well, it actually means a lot to me to this day. I think this is a long time coming for everyone, family-wise. When you think about the history of Sacramento, this is a day where the history of Sacramento becomes broader to where it should be. When you think of the life of Nathaniel Colley, my grandfather, for instance, just in Sacramento alone, in addition to the nation and the state, his life impacted 6 decades of history starting since 1948 into the early 1990s. Affected the lives of Californians, Sacramentans, and so on, and basically helped create the society that we live in today.
Talking about the symbolism of having the star on the street where he first opened his law office 75 years ago.
I think it's very apropos. You know, these very streets are the ones that he affected, just down the street with his first law firm. As the city has grown, I think it's something that we should recognize, including not just this street, but throughout the entire city of Sacramento. He's affected how people live, where people live, and people might not know it right now, but I think they will know it in the future.
Well, I think it really is significant that this is the street where his early practice was. And what I remember about that early practice is that there were plenty of times that we, as kids, were there either running the mimeograph machine or stapling all those pieces of paper together, getting the word out. And so Dad and Mom scooped us up into the work that they were doing, and it gave us all kinds of impetus to know that we could do it too. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. I think it's really important that cities and the country and people in general recognize those folks who have been at the forefront of the civil rights movement, from housing to how we're treated in the criminal justice system to all sorts of areas where inequities thrive. And I'm really proud that Daddy was part of that.
It's quite an honor for Dad, and he worked really hard to help make other people's lives as well as they could be, and so this is a great moment for both of my parents, actually.
You're always very sensitive to include your mother in all of this because she's the one who kept all the records.
She held us all together. He worked late, and she wanted him to make sure he knew all his children, so we had dinner after he would come home about 9 o'clock. But they took us everywhere they went, especially when we were young. And I am sensitive about Mom because my mom saved everything that the History Center has today was because she saved it. She tried her best to archive it and keep all his speeches because she was the typist. Everything he spoke, all his speeches, she typed them because she was his secretary when he opened his first office.
If we hadn't donated the papers, the resurgence of his works would not have been known. I think it kind of revitalizes and, like you said, an introduction or reintroduction to who he was and what he stood for. So this celebration today is just a culmination of the things that he's done over the lifetime.
You know, it's a dream come true. I could not have envisioned something like this happening. What goes through my mind is that it's something that was way overdue and recognizable for the city of Sacramento and for the United States. He was a great man. He's my idol. He meant the world to me, and I learned so much from him, and I had such respect for the way he motivated people, and he was always trying to help the little guy become a better person and have equal opportunity in Sacramento and in the world.
And it is important for me to be here this morning honoring Nat Colley and his legacy and spending this time with his family. His daughters are here, his grandson is here, his great-granddaughter is here, and just to pay homage to who Nat Colley was and what he meant to not only the black community but the American community as well.
What did he mean to you growing up? I mean, obviously you were aware of him as a youth.
Well, certainly, I grew up in one of those underserved communities. I grew up in the Hunters Point housing projects in San Francisco. And people don't realize that even in the housing projects, there was discrimination against blacks, and blacks were not allowed to stay in the housing projects. And certainly Nat Colley championed the whole notion that if this is federal housing, if federal dollars are being spent, then people are entitled to housing, whether they're black, brown, Asian. So it meant a lot to me. And certainly he's one of those icons in my life and those shoulders that I stood upon in order to elevate myself and get to the position that I'm in. And in fact, I look at him just like, people talk about the icons in our community, Thurgood Marshall, certainly Martin Luther King Jr., but for me, Nat Colley stands in that pantheon of black heroes. Sacramento really would not be what it is without Nat Colley. We talk about housing, but he championed education. He championed anything that had to do with injustice. And I'll tell you, he raised some absolutely humble kids. I work with his daughter, and I remember once saying to her, "Why didn't you ever tell me that Nat Colley was your father?" And she said, "That's just my daddy." So a tremendous person. And I can't stress enough how he helped not only Sacramento move forward, but he helped the nation move forward. He was a person that President John F. Kennedy went to for advice. He was a person that Thurgood Marshall went to for advice. And these were people that felt he was on par with them and worthy of talking to in order to move this nation forward.
Andi, what goes through your mind? Here you are on the star that you helped create.
So I'm nearly at a loss for words of what this event means. The journey started about a year and a half ago when we saw an amazing documentary about the life of Mr. Colley on KVIE, Nat Colley, The Time Is Now, and learning about a man here in Sacramento that we did not know about and felt remiss for not knowing about him. I also happened to be the president of the Sacramento County Bar Association last year, and so I took some executive privilege and organized a 3-part speaker series on the life and legacy of Mr. Colley that we held at McGeorge School of Law. But when that event was over, I felt like the story was too important to stop there, and we knew we wanted to do more. We thought that a star here on the Walk of Fame was appropriate. We want to work with the State History Museum. We want to work with courthouses and schools and make sure that the legacy of this important legal giant is well known. So when you ask me how I feel like we've hit another important milestone, but I'm also energized to do more.
California History Museum induction is definitely one thing that comes to immediate mind for myself. He was contemporary of those like Cesar Chavez, for instance, Justice Cruz Reynoso, Jerry Brown. So I think it's quite indeed something that should happen.
I think the sky's the limit because Daddy touched local, state, and national. And I think if people appropriately research his work and his contributions, that will be clear.
Well, I think it's very interesting because when he was alive and people knew about him, they celebrated him while he was alive. He did get a lot of attention, but now, all these years after his passing, and new people are learning about him, which is so gratifying.
This appeared to be a man who spoke truth to power in the most thoughtful way. He was unafraid. I get the impression he felt it was his duty and obligation to speak that truth to power, and that's inspiring. And the fact that too few people know about him, I think, is the harm that we are trying to correct.
I believe the reintroduction of my grandfather, Nat Colley, goes to introducing him and his works to a community that did not know him, and that's the generation of today. With all the social media and social works that are being done, it starts with the foundation of what he was doing in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s.
And to give some type of honor to the role that he played as a young man growing up in Sacramento, as an attorney, the first black attorney in Sacramento, and dealing with all the hardships. I am so lucky to have known him, and I try every day to continue his work.
This is just the start. Personally, I have goals to see Nathaniel Colley become a permanent part of California history in schools, for instance, that every Californian should learn about Nathaniel Colley, given that the lives of parents and grandparents of those very same students were impacted and bettered for it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Gary Lindsey.
Good evening, everyone. This is a pleasure to be here. I think this is a very great time for us to learn about Nathaniel Colley. I'm sure that there's some who might not be aware, right? We're wondering, why do we have a star for Nathaniel Colley? For those who aren't aware, Nathaniel Colley was an icon of civil rights, not just here in Sacramento, but the state of California, across the nation, at the same time as like Martin Luther King. He did civil rights work for the Southern Christian Conference, and also he was for decades and decades on the national board of the NAACP and fought against discrimination, not just in Sacramento, but across the country. And many of his lawsuits here actually paved the way for the country we live in today. As a person, he was both the presidential advisor to two presidents, LBJ and JFK. And he was, at the time, in the past, in California was so well known that he was known as Mr. Civil Rights. But in addition to that, he was friends with Pat Brown, Jerry Brown, Robert Matsui, a name you might recognize from the Sacramento area, from the state, and Justice Anthony Kennedy, a personal friend too. And I think this is a great opportunity to learn more about Nathaniel Colley, and I look forward to the future.
And I want to invite, give a tribute to one and only Nathaniel Sextus Colley. We will not allow Nathaniel Colley and the wave of love warriors in the face of overwhelming hatred. Wave of freedom fighters in the face of care, even from Jim Crow, Alabama, Stonehill, went to Stonehill Institute, studied with George Washington Carver, whose picture you saw, studied chemistry at Tuskegee Institute, went to fight in the war, turned down the University of Alabama Law School, went to Yale Law School, graduated #1 in his class, won the Munson Prize, won the Sharp Prize for the most brilliant essay of any Yale law. Only black student in his class, still so humble, still so dignified, still full of grace, still willing to serve, allowing his star to shine, casting a light on the predicament in light of others. That's what moral and spiritual greatness is, and it's not a function of skin pigmentation, it's a function of how